Control of the United States Senate still hangs in the balance, but in terms of big results we've got already on the United States Senate, Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell holds on to his seat. Allison Lundergan Grimes has conceded. She's already given her speech, as has he. In Arkansas, Democrat Mark Pryor has lost his seat to Republican Congressman Tom Cotton. In the great state of New Hampshire, the Democratic incumbent there, Jeanne Shaheen, she has held on to her seat. She has defeated a challenge from former Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown. Now, in terms of races that for the United States Senate that are still listed as too early to call, those include the Senate races in Georgia. In Georgia, we're looking at David Perdue versus Michelle Nunn. That race too early to call. Another too early to call race is the one in Louisiana, where Democratic incumbent Mary Landrieu is facing Bill Cassidy as her main challenger, but there's, I think, 8 people on the ballot altogether. In Louisiana, it's still too early to call. The other big too early to call race, look at this. Colorado Senate, Cory Gardner versus incumbent Democrat Mark Udall. Half the vote in so far. This is still too early to call. In terms of races that are too close to call, those include the Kansas Senate race, where incumbent Republican Pat Roberts trying to hold on to his seat against a tough challenge from an independent named Greg Orman. Only about 1,000 votes, 1,400 votes between them, with about 21% of the vote in Kansas. That is too close to call. It is also too close to call, and this is interesting, in North Carolina. Too close to call between Kay Hagan, the Democratic incumbent, and Tom Tillis, her Republican challenger and the leader of the Republicans in the North Carolina legislature. 64% of the vote in thus far in North Carolina. We're also looking at a race that is too close to call in the Senate race in Virginia. In Virginia right now, again, Kansas and North Carolina all too close to call. Again, it's too early in Georgia, Louisiana, and Colorado. I want to go for immediate response to Maria Teresa Komar and also to Reverend Al Sharpton and Chris Hayes from MSNBC, looking at the overall state of the Senate right now. Obviously, tons of important governor's races still to come. But Maria Teresa, when you look at these results thus far, what kind of night do you think this has been?
I think it's going the way that we expected. A lot of folks, we have Mitch McConnell, basically, that it was a landslide for him. I don't think that very many folks were surprised. But I think that you have a silver lining when it comes to whether the Democrats are going to pull it out. You see Georgia, where 4% of the Latino vote is still coming up. And they are the fastest growing county in all of the United States, is Stewart County. That hasn't reported. So it'll be interesting what happens, especially because in Georgia, they actually had the roughest, most oppressive immigration law. And we'll see whether or not the black-brown vote actually comes out. In Colorado, you see the same thing. You have roughly over 147 initiatives around the country. Those ballot initiatives, conversely, people come out more if there's a ballot initiative. And you have personhood right now in Colorado, Latino voters, women voters in Colorado. I think that's actually going to be something that we're going to see, because that's what gets people off the couch.
It's interesting, though, watching that Arkansas minimum wage measure. So huge. Arkansas, the Democrats there knew that it was going to pass. What they hoped was that it would goose Democratic base voter turnout enough to give Mark Pryor a chance to hold on to his seat. Mark Pryor, at the poll closing, lost his seat, but that's still won by big double digits. So I think Democrats hang a lot of hope on the turnout effect that these ballot measures can have, but it just depends on how big a hill you got to climb for these things.
But I think one of the things that we're seeing, a couple of things. One, the whole sweep, the avalanche that we were told for months that was going to happen for Republicans has not happened. Now, of course, we don't know whether or not they end up with the majority, but we clearly are not being drenched. You know, we can put away the umbrella, maybe keep out a shower cap, but the flood is not going to happen. Secondly, I think that the route that Chris Matthews said
still alive
is still alive and possible. But let us listen very carefully, because I agree with Congressman Gutierrez and with Maria. It is going to be in many of these key states black and brown voters that even make it close or victorious. Question is, what are we going to get in those communities for doing that? And that could lead to some very serious debate going into 16, because Georgia may be bailed out, Florida and North Carolina, by black and brown voters, and we do not want to just be the ones to deliver people and then go home.
Not being a frail flower. What is the demand?
Well, I think the demand is clear that you're dealing with immigration rights, you're dealing with voter rights, you're dealing with we cannot have, and I think this is going to be a real test for Mrs. Clinton and others in 16. You can't have people come out and vote to protect voter ID, immigration rights, and a lot of progressive thoughts and reward them with triangulation. Because that did not bring you into the competition you're in tonight. So I think that you really are going to watch where these votes come from and where people are going.
You also have to distinguish yourselves on the record. I mean, the Republicans have chosen to obstruct on immigration, making the calculation that obstructing would split the blame evenly. And there is some evidence that has been somewhat effective. If you look at the polling that's come out of Latino Decisions today on Latino voters in Colorado, there's a relatively narrow gap between Cory Gardner, who's part of the House Republicans that block comprehensive immigration reform.
And who is opposed to
immigration reform, and Mark Udall.
Right, but the interesting thing about Gardner is that he also is for personhood. The #1 voter within the Latino community are young women, or Latina women, and that's because the average Latina voter is 27 years old. So when we're talking about minimum wage, when we're talking about the issues of personhood, when we're talking about immigration, they're all living it right now, and that's what the Republican Party has to keep paying attention to.
Which is, okay, so this is a little bit meta, but this I think is the most fascinating thing about this Colorado race between Cory Gardner and Mark Udall, because Cory Gardner was a sponsor of personhood when it's come up before in Colorado. He is still a sponsor of it federally. He's running as if he thinks personhood is a terrible idea. Cory Gardner is against immigration reform. He's running against Mark Udall because Mark Udall didn't get immigration reform passed. So if Cory Gardner beats Mark Udall in Colorado today, it will be because he ran to the left of Mark Udall, criticizing Mark Udall for not being able to deliver on the stuff that Cory Gardner is opposed to. That tells you that Democrats win the argument even if they lose the race.
Let me just say one before we jump all over the Republicans on immigration, which they're wrong on. But this president has not been politically deft on immigration. He wants the issue. I'm not sure he wants the damn bill, because he sells it as he is for amnesty. That Senate bill is damn tough. It's got teeth in it. Why do you think it got a dozen Republican votes? It has real tough things on on E-Verify. It really has to work. You have to be legally here to work here. In 4 years, you have to have a photo ID. It's no more BS hiring cheap labor. You're hopping across the border. It's really tough. And yet he never says that because he wants to appeal to your community. He doesn't want to sell it.
That's not true. He says that it's tough. He got up there in the State of the Union. He basically said, we've deported more people, and we've got $20 billion coming to the border.
You're changing the subject. It's not deportation.
He talks about how tough. They lead with how tough it is. They put $20 billion to buy Gatling guns and put them at the border.
That's not the issue. You're changing the subject. The bill doesn't talk about Gatling guns or deportation. The bill talks about no more illegal hiring. That's the magnet for people coming here. And he doesn't sell that part. He just doesn't. And he ought to stop going for the issue and start going for the bill. And your community is sick of waiting. So I would say it's time for him to get a bill and stop talking the issue.
Well, I mean, first of all, the president can't pass a bill, right? He can do an executive order.
He certainly championed the bill, and he's not doing it.
But I think at the same time is that I don't think the American people realize how tough this bill is.
Why doesn't he tell us?
When he talks about E-Verify, that's every single U.S. citizen also that needs to make sure that they also have the right application.
Like every other country in the world, you need a work permit to work here.
But I think that a lot of libertarians are all of a sudden, they're going to go berserk when they actually find that. I think the more we start digging to it, but I think we have to have, but besides that, when we start talking about immigration reform, we need to have an honest conversation with the American public. We're no longer in a place where this is a luxury. We actually need the workforce.
That's the point.
I know, I agree. Well, let's look. Look, there has to be controls on immigration. And if you don't think so, you're never going to get a bill anyway.
But Chris, that's my point. We've got to come with something of substance. I mean, we're dealing with the era of Michael Brown and Ferguson and all that. People are going to the polls because they're angry and impassioned, and the Democratic Party can't run away from the base that brought them competitive tonight. If they do, it's going to be a problem.
I think the president needs a bill. He doesn't need an issue. He needs a bill right now. Let's go to some news right now from Louisiana. The interesting call here is that this race is going to go to a runoff, and that, of course, will be in December. Nobody's going to get the requisite 50% majority to be able to win this thing tonight because of today's voting. This is a big development. It means that, at least on paper, look at this race here. Obviously, there's a lot of people voting for Manis, the conservative there. But it looks like, with a big push, Mary Landrieu's still in this game. And that means that's going to be an interesting election. Lots of money is going to be pouring into Louisiana between now, especially if it's decisive.
Yeah, that'll happen in December. 8 people on that ballot, and so everybody thought it's going to be hard for anybody to get to 50%. The issue, though, is that once you go to the runoff, it doesn't matter what Rob Manis was able to do. It's just going to be 2 people there. Mary Landrieu is the last statewide elected Democrat in Louisiana. It's going to be very hard for her to win that race. And if the Democrats need that seat in order to hold on to the Senate, it is going to have to be a global noble effort by Democrats in order to try to save her.
Isn't she also the last Democrat representing the Deep South in the Senate?
Well, let's talk about Kay Hagan right now, because Kay Hagan in the North Carolina Senate
Deep South, you're right.
Right now, that is too close to call.
Yeah.
And I think, Steve Kornacki, have you got a little more for us in terms of what's going on in that North Carolina Senate race?
Yeah, let's take a look here. Some interesting things that are still outstanding. Let's take a closer look inside North Carolina. And as you can see, just in terms of the returns, the return pattern here, the pattern in the last hour or so has been tightening. And now you can see Hagan actually falling 2,000 votes behind Tillis. That's with about 70% in. But I want to show you what is still left to come in and why Democrats aren't necessarily alarmed by that, although obviously it's concerning for them. But take a look at this map here and take a look closely. This is Mecklenburg County. This is where Charlotte is, Charlotte, North Carolina. And you can see, now again, we talked about this with Florida. It says that 10% is in. That's not actually really accurate. You're expecting a little over 200,000, about 225,000 maybe would be the ideal turnout here in Mecklenburg County. So you add that together and you're seeing basically probably about half the vote is in Mecklenburg County, Charlotte. Kay Hagan is doing exactly what she needs to do right now. This is about what she did in 2008 when she won the seat, 62%. It's about what President Obama did in Mecklenburg County. So if that holds, what you're talking about here when 100% finally comes in from Mecklenburg would be an additional plurality of 30,000 votes for Kay Hagan. So this is a big Democratic vote-rich area that's probably only about half in right now. And actually, it's not the only place in North Carolina where that's the case. You can look closer. This is Durham County, Durham right outside of Raleigh. Same thing. Now here you're looking at now close to 3/4 of the vote is in. But again, look at the massive margin for Kay Hagan here. She's leading by 38,000. You can expect, again, probably that's going to grow by 10, 12,000. So there are a few of those. There's still votes outstanding in Wake County, which is right here. That's Raleigh. And one other thing quickly to show you on this map. This is interesting to me. We're always talking about, is the Democratic base turning out? Are those Obama voters turning out? Are they excited for this midterm election? Here's Orange County. This is the heart of Obama country. These are college students. This is the University of North Carolina. In 2012, when President Obama got really big numbers in North Carolina, he won Orange County by 33,000 votes. Tonight, 100% is in Orange County, and Kay Hagan's come pretty close to that. She's won this thing by 26,000 votes. That's monster turnout. That's an incredible performance by her. And again, that bodes well when you're looking at these other Democratic areas that are still yet to come. There are still some Republican areas, too, very close, but Democrats are encouraged because of what I just showed you.
Steve Kornacki, thank you, getting us inside those numbers there. In terms of, again, Senate races outstanding right now, too early to call in Georgia and Colorado, too close to call in Kansas, Virginia, and in North Carolina for all the reasons Steve was just explaining. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to be going live to Colorado to Senator Mark Udall's headquarters. Again, that Colorado Senate race, just a crucial one for the Democrats. It is considered to be too early to call, with about 59% of the vote in Colorado. We're going live to Colorado right when we get back. Stay with us.